They said my land was part of the community. I told them to show me the deed. 3 years later, when they finished building 96 houses on it, I showed them mine. When I bought the land, it wasn't just dirt and trees, it was legacy. My father had worked 30 years to afford those 24 acres on the edge of Willow Creek, and when he passed, he left it to me with one sentence carved into his will: never sell what you can grow. I didn't plan on building a farm like he did, but I saw potential. Rolling hills, a lake view, and quiet mornings. It was my refuge from the chaos of city life, a place to start over after my divorce. Then one spring morning, I noticed something strange: orange survey flags dotting the far side of my property line. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe the county was marking drainage lines or a road expansion. But when bulldozers showed up a week later, I realized something was very wrong. I drove down to the end of the gravel road where men in neon vests were digging. "Hey!" I shouted over the noise. "You're in private property." A man in a hard hat looked up, frowned, and waved someone over. Moments later, a woman in a navy blazer approached, clipboard in hand, calm smile painted on like armor. "Good morning, sir. I'm Linda Carver, HOA Development Manager for Willow Creek Estates Phase 2. "Phase 2? I asked, confused. "What Phase 1? She pointed down the hill where brand new townhouses were being framed in wood and concrete. "The community expansion project. You must have received the notice." "Notice? For building on my land?" Her expression faltered for a split second. Then the corporate smile returned. "Our records indicate this parcel was acquired through the county's rezoning initiative. It's part of Willow Creek's master plan." "Rezoning? Master plan?" My father's voice echoed in my head. "Never sell what you can grow." I went home that afternoon, hands shaking, and pulled every document I had: the original deed, title, and property survey. All signed, sealed, and perfectly legal. The land was mine, no question. Yet the next morning, construction continued, louder, bolder, unstoppable. I called the county clerk. They confirmed that according to new maps, the parcel was now listed as pending development. I demanded an explanation, but the clerk could only say, "You'll need to contact the Willow Creek HOA. They're managing that zone now." That's when it hit me. An HOA had somehow claimed control over my father's land. I tried to reason with them. Meetings, calls, even emails to the board. Every time, I got the same response: polite dismissal. "We're reviewing your concern. Our legal team is verifying records. Please refrain from interfering with development." By midsummer, concrete foundations covered 5 acres of my property. They'd moved the fences, cut down my trees, and paved over the little fishing pond where my dad used to take me when I was 10. I stood there one evening, watching the sunset glint off bulldozer tracks, and made myself a promise. If they wanted to play legal games, I'd learn to play better. So I hired a property lawyer named Grant Phillips, an older man who'd spent decades untangling land disputes. When I showed him my documents, he whistled low. "Son, you're sitting on a gold mine, and they're building a subdivision on it?" "Exactly," I said, "and they think I don't know what I own." He chuckled, rubbing his chin. "Then don't show your hand yet. Let them build. Let them invest, pave, and sell. The more they put in, the more leverage you have when it's time to collect." It sounded insane, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If I sued now, they'd bury me in paperwork. If I waited, if I let them finish, then I'd have undeniable proof of encroachment on an active deed. I nodded slowly. "So I just let them build?" Grant smiled. "You wait, you watch, and you keep every record." That's how my 3-year chess match with the HOA began. Every morning, I'd watch trucks roll in. Every week, another "coming soon" sign appeared. Streets were paved, mailboxes installed, houses painted in pastel perfection. Families moved in, laughing, barbecuing, waving at me as if I was part of their new community. I stayed silent. I mowed my grass, I paid my taxes, and I kept my proof. And every night I documented everything: drone photos, time-stamped videos, emails with county officials, and even public listings showing homes sold on Parcel 47A, my land. I built my evidence file like they built their subdivision, brick by brick. Sometimes I'd see Linda Carver drive by in her black SUV, clipboard still in hand. She'd wave politely, assuming I'd given up. She had no idea I was waiting. By year 3, the Willow Creek Estates neighborhood was a picturesque dream. Tree-lined streets, 96 modern homes, a community park, and even a private pool. And all of it, every inch, rested on my deed. When the last house sold, I called Grant. "You ready?" I asked. He laughed. "Oh, I've been ready for a year. Let's give them the surprise of their lives." The first year had been about shock. The second, about silence. The third, that was when I started planning payback. By then, the Willow Creek Estate subdivision was a living, breathing neighborhood. The HOA held meetings, set lawn regulations, and mailed out newsletters about community pride. Every week, they sent flyers about pool hours and parking policies as if I was one of their members. I wasn't, but they thought I was. They even mailed me an HOA dues statement for $480. I pinned it to my fridge like a trophy. One warm Saturday morning, I decided to take a walk through what used to be my father's pasture. The new roads were freshly paved and lined with identical mailboxes. Kids played in driveways, parents chatted by SUVs, sprinklers hissed quietly on manicured lawns. It was like something out of a real estate brochure. I passed a man trimming his hedges and nodded. "Nice morning," I said. He smiled. "Beautiful day in Willow Creek, huh? You new to the neighborhood?" I almost laughed. "Not exactly." He shrugged and went back to his yard work. None of them knew their dream homes sat on the wrong deed. None of them knew their friendly HOA president, Linda Carver, had built their lives on stolen ground. I kept walking until I reached the park at the center of the subdivision. It used to be a field where my dad and I planted apple trees. Now it was a playground surrounded by a wooden fence, complete with a shiny plaque. Donated by the Willow Creek HOA. That one stung. A week later, I attended my first HOA meeting, uninvited. It was held in the new clubhouse, a glass and brick building that overlooked the artificial lake they dredged from my old creek. I walked in wearing jeans and a denim jacket, carrying my old leather portfolio under my arm. Linda was at the front, leading the meeting with her trademark smile. "And as we move into the next fiscal quarter," she said, "we'll be raising dues slightly to support landscaping improvements around the park area." I raised my hand. Every head turned. "Yes," she said politely, scanning her attendance sheet. "I don't see your name on the list. Are you a new resident?" "Not exactly," I replied, "but I do own a pretty big piece of this neighborhood." The room chuckled softly, assuming it was a joke. I smiled. "No, really, you're standing on it." She frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, this is a private meeting for residents and HOA members only." "I'm aware," I said, walking toward her table. "But considering this clubhouse sits on my land, I think that makes me a stakeholder, don't you?" She went rigid. "Sir, I think you're mistaken. This property belongs to Willow Creek Development, LLC." "Maybe you should check the deed," I said softly, setting a folder on her desk. "You'll find my father's name on it, and mine." Whispers spread through the crowd. Linda blinked, then laughed nervously. "I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. I'll have our legal team review it." "Good idea," I said, "because when you're done reviewing, we're going to have a very different kind of meeting. In court." Then I left. The next day, I got a call from the HOA's attorney. His tone was smug, the kind of confidence that only comes from believing your client can't possibly be wrong. "Mr. Reed," he began, "I've reviewed your claim and it appears you're mistaken. The county rezoned that parcel in 2019. "Rezoning doesn't void a deed," I replied calmly. "Well, the development was approved by people who didn't check the title chain," I've got certified copies of every transaction since 1974, not one transfer out of the Reed family. Silence. He cleared his throat. We'll, take a closer look and get back to you. They didn't get back to me. Instead, a week later, I received a cease and desist letter accusing me of harassment and trespassing on HOA property. Grant laughed so hard when he read it, he nearly spilled his coffee. He said, "They're digging their own grave. Every document they send you adds weight to your case." I nodded, trying not to grin. "So we wait?" He leaned back in his chair. "Oh, we do more than wait. We watch. And when the time's right, we file everything in one clean, brutal motion." Months passed. Construction was long finished, families were settled, and the HOA was thriving on my land. They hosted barbecues, holiday parades, even a charity 5K. Every event was another reminder of what they'd stolen. But every time I felt anger rise, I thought of my dad's voice. Never sell what you can grow. And oh, I was growing something. Patience, evidence, and leverage. I began quietly attending public county meetings. I introduced myself to zoning officers, building inspectors, and property assessors. I didn't threaten anyone. I just asked polite questions. I collected copies of permits, contractor invoices, HOA filings, and even mortgage disclosures for the homes sold in Phase 2. Each document tied the development deeper into a web of illegality. They had built homes, sold them, and collected dues, all without owning the dirt beneath them. It was the biggest mistake an HOA could ever make. Then came the night when everything turned. It was late November, just after Thanksgiving. A storm had knocked out power in half the neighborhood, and the sound of backup generators hummed through the night. I sat in my truck, parked at the edge of the property line, watching lights flicker in windows that stood on my soil. My phone buzzed. It was Grant. "You ready to end this?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah, let's do it." "Good," he said. "Tomorrow we file, but not just for ownership. We're filing for damages." I frowned. "How much are we talking?" He paused. "Every square foot, every house, every sale, every HOA fee collected on your land. By my estimate," he let out a low whistle, "you're looking at about $60 million in restitution." I stared out at the rows of houses, my heart pounding. I wasn't a greedy man. I just wanted what was mine. But hearing that number, it was more than justice. It was legacy. "Let's make them see what they built," I said quietly. And we did. The courthouse smelled like old paper and arrogance. I stood outside the doors at 8:45 a.m., holding a thick binder labeled "Read the Willow Creek HOA et al." My lawyer, Grant, was beside me, coffee in one hand, calm as ever. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Been ready for 3 years." He smirked. "Good. Let's go take back your land." When we entered the courtroom, I expected maybe a couple of HOA representatives and a lawyer or two. Instead, the place was packed. Rows of anxious homeowners filled the seats, whispering, holding papers, eyes darting nervously. At the front table sat Linda Carver, the HOA president, looking pale but defiant, flanked by 3 attorneys in gray suits. Grant leaned toward me. "Looks like they brought an army." I grinned. "Let's see if they brought their deeds." The judge, a sharp, silver-haired woman named Hon Marianne Cole, entered and called the case. "Mr. Reed, you're claiming ownership of the land currently developed as Willow Creek Estates?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said clearly. "The land was never legally transferred out of my family's possession." "And the defendants?" The HOA's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, these claims are baseless. The development was approved, permitted, and purchased in good faith. My clients have invested millions of dollars in years of community building." On property they didn't own, Grant interrupted. We have titles, recorded against the wrong parcel, Grant shot back, sliding a folder across the table. Your Honor, Exhibit A through F, official county records proving the Reed family's deed was never released, sold, or condemned. The HOA and their developers built on land they never purchased. The judge raised an eyebrow. That's, quite an allegation. I spoke softly, but every word carried. It's not an allegation, Your Honor. It's a fact. For the next 2 hours, Grant walked the court through the paper trail. The original deed from 1974, tax records showing I'd been paying property tax every year, an aerial map showing exactly where the development sat, right in the middle of my parcel. The HOA lawyers tried every trick in the book, claiming clerical error, invoking good faith construction, even suggesting I was mistaken about my own land. But every time, Grant countered with cold, undeniable documents. Then came the moment that silenced the room. Grant placed a map on the projector, zooming into the subdivision layout. Your Honor, each of these 96 homes was sold under the assumption of valid title, but because the underlying land was never conveyed, each homeowner technically purchased nothing. Their houses sit on land owned by Mr. Reed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few homeowners started whispering loudly. One man stood up, shouting, "What the hell does that mean for us?" The judge banged her gavel. "Order! Everyone sit down!" Grant didn't flinch. "It means, Your Honor, that this HOA owes my client not only compensation for land value, but damages for unlawful construction, trespass, and unauthorized profit derived from the sale of property they did not own." He turned to the defense. In other words, they built an empire on stolen dirt. When the session adjourned for lunch, I walked outside into the courtyard. The homeowners followed me, surrounding me like a storm. A woman with tears in her eyes grabbed my arm. "Please tell me, are we going to lose our homes?" I looked her in the eye. "I don't want to take anyone's house. I want justice from the people who knew this was wrong and did it anyway." Linda appeared behind her, face flushed with anger. "You're ruining families, Mr. Reed." I turned slowly. "You did that when you signed off on stolen land." Her voice cracked. "We didn't know." I tilted my head. "You didn't want to know." That night the story hit local news. Homeowners Association accused of building an entire neighborhood on stolen land. Within hours, my phone exploded with calls from reporters. HOA members panicked. Realtors froze listings. And by the next morning, Willow Creek Estates wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a scandal. The HOA's lawyers filed an urgent motion to dismiss the case. The judge denied it. The case was officially moving forward. Weeks passed as the legal firestorm grew. Depositions, discovery, media coverage. It was everywhere. Every homeowner wanted answers, but the HOA board stopped communicating. They locked down finances, deleted their website, even changed their office locks. Grant and I kept gathering evidence. Every letter, email, and internal memo from the developer's office showed the same pattern. They'd been warned multiple times about unclear title transfers. They'd ignored them, rushing to build before the housing market cooled. It wasn't a mistake. It was fraud. By January, the judge called a preliminary ruling hearing. The courtroom was even more crowded this time, standing room only. The air buzzed with tension. Judge Cole reviewed the mountain of evidence, flipped through pages, and finally looked up. "I have reviewed both the plaintiff's and defendant's documentation. The evidence clearly establishes that the parcel identified as Willow Creek Estates remains under the deed of the Reed family. All construction and conveyances were conducted without valid title." The HOA attorney jumped up. "Your Honor, these homes were built in good faith." "Then your client's faith was misplaced," she interrupted sharply. Silence. Her voice softened slightly as she turned toward me. "Mr. Reed, this court recognizes your continued legal ownership of the land in question." My chest tightened. I'd waited years to hear those words, but she wasn't done. As for the remedy, she continued, this court will proceed to determine damages and potential remedies, including compensation, land repurchase, or relocation. The defendants are hereby ordered to enter mediation with the plaintiff within 30 days. Gasps, murmurs, some homeowners wept openly. Linda sat frozen, staring at nothing. Grant leaned toward me. You just won phase 1. Outside the courthouse, microphones and cameras swarmed me. Mr. Reed, what are you going to do with the land? Will you evict the homeowners? Are you seeking money or revenge? I paused before answering. I'm seeking what's fair. My father taught me never to take from others, but also never to let others take from you. The HOA stole our land. They built on it, and now they're going to pay for it. The cameras flashed. The story spread. And somewhere in the crowd, I caught sight of Linda being led away by reporters, face pale, eyes wide with fear. That night, I drove through Willow Creek again. The Christmas lights twinkled on rooftops, kids' laughter echoed from driveways, and it hit me how innocent most of them were. They hadn't stolen anything. They just bought homes. But those homes stood on my soil. The storm had only begun. The morning of mediation, the air in the conference center felt heavier than usual, like everyone already knew how it would end. Rows of HOA representatives, developers, and attorneys filled the long oak table, each face drawn tight with exhaustion and fear. I sat at the far end, beside Grant, watching them shuffle papers and whisper. Their body language said it all. The empire was cracking. Across from me sat Linda Carver, still in her polished blazer, but the confidence was gone. Her hair was tied back hastily, and dark circles framed her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. When the mediator, a calm man in his 60s, called the session to order, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Let's make this easy, I said. You built 96 homes on land you didn't own. The least you can do now is admit it. Linda looked down, then back up, trembling slightly. It wasn't me, she said softly. I didn't know. Grant slid a folder across the table. You signed the approval letters, Mrs. Carver. 3 of them, all of which referenced the disputed parcel number. She didn't answer. The developer's lawyer jumped in instead. My client, Brookstone Development, maintains they purchased the land in good faith from an approved vendor. If there was a title issue, it was a clerical oversight by the county. Grant opened another folder. Then maybe you can explain this email from your client's vice president, dated March 11th, 3 years ago. The Reed deed is still showing active. We'll move forward anyway. It'll get sorted later. The room went dead silent. I watched Linda's hand twitch, her jaw tightening. The mediator sighed. Mr. Reed, what are you seeking today? I took a deep breath. Fair market value for the land, compounded for 3 years of unauthorized use, plus damages for trespass and emotional distress, and an official public acknowledgement of wrongdoing by the HOA. The HOA's lead attorney scoffed. You're asking for nearly $8 million. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm asking for what's mine. The negotiations dragged on for hours. Offers, counteroffers, attempts at sympathy, none of it worked. They wanted me to settle quietly, to sign a confidentiality agreement, to walk away with a smaller check and keep the HOA's reputation intact. But I wasn't here for silence. I was here for truth. At one point, Linda broke down in tears. She told me everything was legal, she whispered. The developer said the land had been cleared. I trusted them. Grant didn't even flinch. You had every reason to verify. You ignored 3 certified letters from my client before construction even began. She covered her face. I thought you were bluffing. I leaned forward, voice calm but sharp. You thought I'd just let it go. You thought nobody fights the HOA. But you were wrong. By 5 p.m., the developers realized the damage was irreparable. Their insurance wouldn't cover fraud. Their investors were pulling out, and the homeowners, terrified and angry, had begun forming a class action against them. The HOA was collapsing from the inside out. By evening, Linda's attorney quietly approached Grant in the hallway. If Mr. Reed agrees to waive eviction rights, the HOA will pay full land value plus an additional settlement for damages. Confidentiality is optional. Grant looked at me. You want to take it? I stared down the hallway at the framed photo of the Willow Creek ribbon-cutting ceremony. There was Linda, smiling next to the mayor. And me, I was somewhere off camera, mowing the land they'd later steal. No, I said, not yet. 2 weeks later, the HOA called for an emergency homeowner meeting. They invited me, probably expecting I'd refuse. I went anyway. When I arrived, the community center was overflowing, dozens of families packed into folding chairs, murmuring, holding copies of the lawsuit and news clippings. At the front stood Linda, visibly shaking, trying to keep order. I walked to the podium, folder in hand. The room fell completely silent. I didn't come here to fight, I began. I came here to remind you of something this HOA forgot. Respect. For people, for property, for the law. A man shouted from the back, "Are we losing our homes?" I shook my head. No, not if you stand with me instead of them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Linda looked horrified. The people responsible for this mess aren't the families who bought homes. It's the board that ignored warnings and the developers who forged ahead despite knowing the truth. I've offered them a choice. Admit fault, pay for what they took, and protect the homeowners from legal fallout, or watch it all come out in federal court. A woman stood, voice trembling. You're not trying to kick us out?" I smiled faintly. "Mom, I've been your neighbor long before those gates went up. I'm not here to destroy your homes. I'm here to destroy the arrogance that built them." The room erupted, applause, relief, even tears. But not from Linda. Her eyes were cold now, like glass. "You think you're a hero," she hissed under her breath as I stepped away from the podium. I leaned in close enough for only her to hear. No, just a landowner tired of being bullied. A month later, the HOA board resigned in disgrace. Linda submitted her resignation letter the same day the developer filed for bankruptcy. The county opened a criminal investigation into fraudulent land use permits. Several officials were suspended. News stations ran nightly updates, calling it the Willow Creek scandal. And me? I waited, because the final hearing, the one that would decide compensation, was coming. Grant said I had already won, but I wasn't celebrating yet, not until I saw justice on record. The night before the final hearing, I drove through Willow Creek again. This time, the neighborhood felt different. Gone were the HOA patrols, the violation slips, the cold stares. Kids played basketball in driveways again. Neighbors waved. A few even nodded gratefully as I passed by. Then I saw Linda's house. Dark, the for sale sign crooked in the yard. I parked across the street for a moment, engine running. The wind rustled the trees and the lake shimmered under the moonlight. For years, they'd told me I didn't belong here, that I had to comply or face consequences. Now, the tables had turned. The land was still mine, always had been, and tomorrow the world would hear it, officially. The courthouse smelled like old wood and colder justice. I'd been there before, zoning hearings, small claims, even a land use petition once. But that morning felt different, final. Outside, a crowd had gathered, homeowners, reporters, even curious locals. The Willow Creek scandal had become national news. Local man outsmarts HOA, one headline read. Developer faces $60 million land grab lawsuit, said another. Grant adjusted his tie beside me. You ready for this? I said, as ready as I'll ever be. We walked through the metal detectors, the hum of murmurs following behind us. It was almost poetic. The same people who once called me a nuisance were now watching me take down the empire that had built itself on my father's soil. The courtroom buzzed with quiet energy as the session began. On one side sat the HOA's legal team, 6 lawyers, laptops open, stacks of binders labeled Reed versus Willow Creek HOA et al. On the other sat the developers, flanked by corporate counsel and insurance reps, all sweating under the weight of what was about to come. And in the front row, homeowners, families who'd unknowingly built their lives on a lie. Some looked nervous, some looked angry, but when I caught their eyes, they nodded, small gestures of solidarity. Linda wasn't sitting with the HOA anymore. She was alone in the second row, eyes down, hands clasped. The judge entered, a tall man with steel gray hair and the kind of face that told you he'd seen every trick in the book. Court is now in session, he said, voice deep and steady. Reed versus Willow Creek Homeowners Association et al. Grant began with precision, calm, factual, devastating. He laid out the chain of title from 1974. Every survey, every boundary line, every zoning approval that never legally transferred ownership. He played the developer's internal emails on a projector, lines like, "Ignore the Reed claim," and "We'll sort out the deed later." The courtroom gasped. Then he showed the financials, HOA dues collected on private common areas, the clubhouse revenue, the property taxes they never had a right to levy. It was all there in black and white. When the defense tried to object, the judge simply held up a hand. "You'll have your turn, counselor." But their turn didn't help. Every argument collapsed under documentation. By midday, it wasn't a fight anymore. It was an autopsy. At one point, the judge turned to me directly. "Mr. Reed, you've sat quietly through all of this. Would you like to make a statement before I render judgment?" I stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes turn my way. "Your Honor, I'm not here to gloat. I'm here because what my father built was stolen. Not just land, but trust. This HOA and these developers thought they could bulldoze both." I paused, scanning the faces of the homeowners. I could have kicked every family out. I had the legal right to do so, but I didn't, because people don't deserve to lose their homes for someone else's greed. I just want accountability and a reminder that power doesn't make you right. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then the judge nodded once. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. You may sit." After a recess, the ruling came down like a thunderclap. The judge's gavel struck. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Thomas Reed." I exhaled, slow, steady. The defendants, Willow Creek Homeowners Association and Brookstone Development, are hereby ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $48.7 million to Mr. Reed for unlawful construction and unauthorized use of property. Furthermore, the HOA is dissolved effective immediately, pending the appointment of a transitional community management board. Gasps filled the courtroom. Someone in the back actually cheered. The judge continued. Additionally, the court acknowledges Mr. Reed's decision not to seek residential evictions, which will be formally recorded as an act of good faith. The deeds for all 96 homes shall be reissued under his land lease authorization. I looked over at Linda. Her face was pale, eyes glassy. She mouthed something I couldn't quite read. Maybe, "I'm sorry?" I nodded once, but didn't reply. Outside, the courthouse steps were chaos. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting, microphones thrust in my face. "How does it feel to win? Are you going to rebuild Willow Creek? Do you forgive the HOA?" I didn't answer at first. I just looked out at the sea of faces, at the homeowners huddled together, relieved and tearful. Finally, I said, "It feels like peace." The following weeks were surreal. The development company folded. Linda moved out quietly, leaving a short handwritten note in my mailbox. I hope you can find forgiveness someday. I never saw her again. The homeowners elected a new committee. No HOA, just a simple neighborhood association. Their first rule? No fines, no threats, just neighbors. They invited me to the first cookout, right by the lake my father once fished. I brought a case of beer and a photo of him in his old hat, smiling. Kids splashed in the water, dogs ran through the grass, and for the first time in years, the land felt alive again. Not stolen, not owned, just home. Later that night, I stood at the edge of the lake, the sunset burning orange across the ripples. Grant walked up beside me, hands in his pockets. "You could have taken double that in settlement," he said. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, but money fades. Stories don't." He chuckled. "You think they'll make a movie out of it?" I looked at the neighborhood, the lights flicking on one by one. They already did. We just lived it. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through patience. The HOA thought they owned everything that mattered, the rules, the power, the signatures. But they forgot what truly gives something value, integrity. My father used to say, land doesn't make a man rich. What he does with it does. And standing there, watching those families rebuild trust on the same ground where greed once stood, I finally understood. This wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about reclaiming peace, proving that ordinary people can stand up to systems built on arrogance and still come out whole. I didn't destroy their community. I give it back its soul.